This week on To the Contrary.
First, Trump nominees answer questions on rights for women and LGBTQ persons, while Democrats resist the GOP agenda. Then, organizers want the Women's March to be more than just a mass gathering.
Bonnie Bay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, Trump nominees and civil rights.
While most of the world and the media are focused on the Russian hacks and President-elect Donald Trump's potential conflicts of interest and ethics issues, To the Contrary is looking at this week's confirmation hearings and how cabinet members will address issues that affect women, children, and underserved communities. During confirmation hearings for retired Marine General James Mattis, Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand questioned him about comments he made in 2014, saying putting women in combat doesn't set them up for success. But Mattis told the Senate panel if he becomes the next Secretary of Defense, he will not roll back women's advancement in the military and will continue current policies that allow women to serve in combat roles. New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker took the unusual step of testifying against the nomination of a fellow senator, Jeff Sessions, Republican of Alabama, to become Attorney General. He said Jeff Sessions is not qualified to defend the rights of LGBT people, women, immigrants, and racial minorities. Rape survivor Amita Swadin objected to Sessions' initial response that grabbing women by the genitalia, as Trump once bragged of doing, did not constitute sexual assault. Sessions on Tuesday said it clearly does, and he was wrong to say otherwise. Sessions also said, despite his opposition to abortion and same-sex marriage, he would abide by the Supreme Court decision making them legal. The nominee to head the State Department, Rex Tillerson, answered questions from Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire about women's programs that provide contraception and economic aid to women globally. They do not support abortion. Tillerson said he stands behind these empowerment initiatives, but didn't know much about them except that $500 million are allocated to the projects. He stopped short of committing to continuing funding at that level. Tillerson is the former CEO of ExxonMobil, a company that has reportedly lagged behind on diversity. Meanwhile, #Resist has become the symbol of the Democrats, tweeting about cabinet nominees and efforts to defund Planned Parenthood and repeal Obamacare.
So, Genevieve Wood, how big of a resistance movement do you think that the Democrats can cobble together?
Well, I think you see them playing their role, and they should. They should be asking tough questions based on the policies that they care about, their constituents care about. At the end of the day, I think most of these I think all the nominees are going to get through. I think most of them will get through with both Democrat and with Republican and some Democrat support.
It's not going to be big enough. The bottom line is that this president that we will have soon is dangerous. He is dangerous to this democracy. And I hope that the Democrats have the courage to do any and everything possible to stop him and his agenda.
I think the Democrats will kick and fight and scream and do what they will during these hearings. But at the end of the day, I also believe that these picks will be confirmed because the alternatives to these Democrats in particular are far worse.
I think there's a short-term answer to that, which is they're going to try very hard, and Senator Feinstein did a terrific job interrogating Sessions and questioning his position on women's issues. But the likelihood is that he is going to get the position of Attorney General. For me, the interesting point is going to be in the next congressional elections, if the Democrats are going to be able to pick up some seats to show that the majority of the American people do not support Trump.
Well, how we all know, the Washington Post reported about a month ago now, that Tillerson, the transition team, requested the names of all the State Department positions who deal with helping women gain equal rights globally, on a global scale, including a global ambassador on women's issues. Do you think, he said he wouldn't get rid of those positions, but then why did they ask for those particular positions in the first place?
Well, I think they've asked for particular positions on a whole host of issues, and part of that is going in and doing your homework. I mean, the State Department is one of the largest agencies of all the cabinets, and I was learning the other day they actually have a larger digital operation than the White House does. So, I mean, it's right to go and go, how are we spending our money? Is it appropriate based on the policies that we as an administration are wanting to put into effect? And Tillerson doesn't have government experience, so I think this is his first run at the State Department. So I think you should be doing your homework like that.
What are Democrats going to do if he does eliminate those positions? And I actually spoke last night, or traded emails, I should say, with the woman who held the first ambassadorship, global women's issues, Milan Verveer, and she doesn't think they'll be eliminated. But from where I sit, it looks like they're going to be.
I think they're setting it up so that they might not necessarily directly eliminate those positions, but they might force people to resign. And the way that they're doing this is they've already passed a law that says that they can reduce the salaries of federal employees to $1. So if you pass that law and you say that you apply that to certain individuals who you've pre-identified, then in essence you're firing people without actually having to fire people.
And two things,
for once, we're not having a civil servant come up the ranks, right? So Tillerson is a businessman. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He has run ExxonMobil with, wow, incredible prowess. Some would argue that many of the things he's done have not been ethical, and I don't like how he's conducted himself during these hearings entirely, but I don't think he's going to do things that are overtly bad for women coming out of the gate. If you're a businessman, you understand that doing things that don't further women in other parts of the world is going to be bad all around. The effects are going to be felt here at home, and I don't know that he's going to make rash decisions. So I think he'll let things stay as they are for a while, and then perhaps we'll see some real change come many days after.
As someone who spent about 15 years on the Hill and at the Supreme Court and Justice Department watching confirmation hearings as a reporter, I've often wondered, the people of both parties say things that don't remain true once they get into their jobs.
No.
Why don't we have a way of holding them accountable? In other words, if you lie to the Senate and say, I won't eliminate these positions, and then you do, you're fired.
Yeah, it's not that simple, but I find it fascinating is that Trump is being a master of preempting the space for the Democrats. And they clearly told all these nominees to be extremely moderate and extremely conservative, and to a message that was clearly, we're going to abide by the law. Which is true, and they will do, but the problem here is about how they're going to change the law.
Absolutely.
And how they're going to proceed. And when they were asked hard questions about those, they didn't answer. And Tillerson was an embarrassment. And my speculation about him, he's going to be an extremely weak Secretary of State, because he's a businessman, but he doesn't understand diplomacy in the governmental side of it.
But let me
finish.
Let her finish.
And I think the White House is going to run foreign affairs. That's really what's going on. And the really hard positions that the Trump people have expressed, they're really coming out of the leadership of the Bannon, of Flynn, and the people, and Pence, and the people that are going to be running the White House, and that's where we need to be watching.
Well, you're right that they may come in and try to change the laws, but that's kind of why we have elections. And the people decided they wanted to change the laws. They wanted to change the directions of the State Department, things that are happening.
And why shouldn't they be required to say how?
I think they will be. But I mean, let's keep in mind,
the
Congress
hearings
has
are
to make
over,
laws.
and they weren't.
Well, on all the hearings, I mean, for some of the nominees, they're going to be over, but the votes haven't occurred yet. But look, Bonnie, if people don't like how the State Department ends up being run, they will have a chance to next time around not elect Donald Trump, okay? Mm-hmm. And Congress has a role here, including the Democrat Senate. Their job is to keep a check on these agencies. And I will tell you, I don't think Congress has been playing its job of keeping a check on agencies for some time.
A Republican Congress.
You're absolutely right.
Avis, next question. Yeah. Sessions. Will he get through, and what's he going to do to African American America?
He will definitely get through. I believe that he's a danger, specifically to the African American community. Whenever I hear the phrase law and order, it transports me back to the days of segregation and the days of police brutality run rampant. And so given what we've experienced in recent years in this nation, to have someone over justice who subscribes to that sort of ideology, to me, is absolutely frightening.
Sessions has enjoyed bipartisan support across the Senate and House, and I think he's going to get through. There's just no two ways about it. There are Democrats who say they feel him to be competent. Cory Booker himself worked with him on a number of pieces of legislation, and I just don't.
And still testified against
him. And still testified against him, which is what's funny.
One at a time, or nobody is heard.
I'll just say that there were African, and I feel sorry, Avis. I feel bad that you feel that way because I like you a lot, and I know that you're a straight-up person. I don't think you would say something about somebody you didn't believe.
Right.
But I also know African Americans in Alabama that have dealt with him who feel very differently, who know him personally. Well, I hope that you're going to have that experience.
If you say that, but the NAACP staged a sit-in at his office.
No, I'm talking about African Americans who have worked with him in Alabama,
absolutely.
who are his constituents, not national organizations coming into professional.
You need to separate individuals from the policy.
Absolutely.
You need to separate individuals from the policy, and he has a very clear record. And on immigration, people are very, very scared. He's actually very upfront about eliminating the temporary protection that many of the people that came here as children and are illegal and are trying to get legal status. So there is a big concern.
Wait. Let her get in.
Well, I just want to say what Sessions is for enforcing our immigration laws, not going around them, which is what President Obama did when he made the executive order you're talking about. Is he going to be, and whoever the head of immigration ends up being, are they going to be, do they want to cut immigration? Do they want to cut the number of immigrants coming? I think the first thing they're going to say is we need to enforce the laws that we have on our books. And then I think as a whole, as a country, we need to look at our immigration system as a whole, whether it's visas, whether it's the border, whether we deal with those that are currently here illegally, and we take them on one by one. We absolutely need to do that.
One other thing
you talked about Sessions being fair.
People say so. I don't know but I've heard.
The appointees. I've never seen a more male, more white cabinet since about Richard Nixon, before people really started paying attention.
Well, let's
to that
look at who's stacking the House, in general, and the Senate.
Do you think just because when he initially reacted, he said grabbing genitalia was not sexual assault, now he's saying it is? Do you expect that he will run a Justice Department that will keep the violence against women office staffed and funded and go after men who commit violence against women?
I think him coming back and saying, listen, I've given this further thought, and walking that back was better for him. I think it was a knee-jerk reaction, the first comment he made, because...
Wasn't he speaking his real feelings at that point?
I think he was speaking to what he thought would be popular, because let's not forget, he was the first person to come out from Congress supporting Donald Trump. I mean, he was his biggest supporter. That's what worries me. I see Tillerson, I see Pompeo, two picks that I really actually quite like. But Sessions worried me, despite the popular support from the Hill, from his colleagues, because he supports Donald Trump so much. They were so buddy-buddy all along the campaign trail. So the questions that come up in the hearings are, will you go against the president-elect if you feel he's wrong at times? I don't have that trust, just because they got so close and it was so obvious. I mean, they were on the road together all the time. I don't know so I want to wait and see.
I don't think he has.
He's
famous because he was one of the few senators that voted against the Violence Against Women Act. Mm-hmm. I believe it was 2012, and his record is pretty bad. Bad. So where his words are, again, I don't trust him. But, he positioned himself well. We got senators like Susan Collins saying he's my friend. So it's hard to believe that he's not going to get the position.
And also, one thing, voting rights. I think he's a threat to voting rights. He may have black friends. Good for him. But in terms of his policies,
he stood up for black people in the voting rights case. He has not.
Do not interrupt, please.
But he has not been in favor of any legislation to fix the gutting of the Voting Rights Act that we've experienced since the Supreme Court decision.
All right, that's it. Please let us know what you think about all this. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay or at To the Contrary. From hearings in Congress to the activity outside of the Capitol.
Preparations are in full swing in Washington for Donald Trump's inauguration as the 45th President of the United States. But along with ceremony and celebrations, there will be protests. The largest protest is expected to be the Women's March on Washington the day after the inaugural.
This administration cannot ignore hundreds of thousands of people. This is going to be the largest mass mobilization that any new administration has ever seen on their first day. That's just the fact.
Democratic U.S. Representative Jan Schakowsky of Illinois told me it's crucial that women and men turn out.
The number of people who show up, women and men as well, will serve as a barometer of how serious are women in fighting back. How fierce is this opposition to taking away women's rights, women's health care, women's control of their own bodies? And so that's why I think attending, regardless of, I'm not sure exactly what the agenda will be, but regardless of that, I think women need to just be there to show that we are seriously against the kinds of cutbacks, the kinds of violations of our autonomy that we're seeing coming out of the Trump administration, out of the Republicans.
More than 200 civil rights organizations have partnered with march organizers, and there are nearly 300 sister marches planned for cities and communities across the country.
There is a very big backlash to what the Trump and Republican platform stands for. Women's groups, labor groups, civil rights groups, human rights groups, people who are concerned with the environment are coming together. We don't know where, what they'll try to push back, but we know one thing: we're not going back to another day. We're going to the future.
I march to normalize equality. I march to show that unity above all matters.
Lily Claire Nussbaum is helping organize buses to D.C. from New York. She stresses the march is important, but it's only the beginning.
What we want is to usher in our own new era. There's a new era being ushered in the White House on the 20th, and on the 21st, we want to usher in our new era of work and support and equality. We, in the New York City chapter, are really excited to begin our work, specifically getting more women and minorities into government office at a local level. Because how do you start? You start from the ground up. That's where we're planning to focus our energy immediately following the march.
The march will also contain a contingent of maybe 200 pro-life women who agree with the broad coalition of marchers on everything but abortion rights.
We felt like it was important to also sort of have a pro-life voice, a counterpart to that, not to argue, not to protest or anything, but we realize how valuable women's voices are, and so we just wanted to make ours heard as well.
On a recent video call, march organizers said this won't be just an anti-march.
This is also an exercise for communities to start envisioning the country that we want to live in and stop focusing just on fighting against all the injustices happening around us. This is a much more sophisticated level of organizing that we're bringing people to inspire them. We're not trying to enrage people more. We're trying to inspire people toward action.
So, Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver, we're going to start with a couple of questions that our viewers tweeted us, one of which from Nyla Amaro is she wants to hear from the panelists on how you can exercise activism in your daily life.
So, Nyla, I'm glad she asked that question because it's critically important. I really encourage people to get very involved at the local level, your local government, your state government. Really make sure that I would actually encourage her to maybe even think about either running for office herself or figuring out who she knows who should run for office and encourage that person. And lastly, get to know your federal Congress people and email and write and call them when you find an issue that you really want to get behind.
The best way to be an activist in today's society is to become informed and stay informed. And we have so many ways through which we can do that now.
Don't you think social getting involved on social media is important?
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the best ways people can do it. Look at how much has changed in this past decade. This is the number one way that young people exercise that activist streak, myself included. I think daily activism, it's completely up to the person, really, what you have time for. Whether it's a conversation in your town hall, attending a town hall, that's a method of activism. And for some others, it's tweeting every hour. Others, it's sit-ins and protests. But really, the word activism has really changed. I consider myself a conservative activist because I think it's important to share conservative values and ideals with people who don't think that conservatives are really activists. It's always, in the age that I grew up in, taken more of a liberal slant, that liberals are activists. They're the ones who hold the signs at the rallies. And no, we don't have to let it be defined by one particular group.
Well, the Trump supporters trolling every person they oppose is exactly a form of activism, and it's not one that I want to replicate. But I would say all of it, everything Avi says, absolutely correct. I think we need to focus a lot in the congressional elections. I think it's very critical to identify a couple of races that can send a very loud message of where we stand. And if you care deeply about women's issues, candidates that strongly support a women's agenda that reflects your values, and if they win, that is the biggest message that you can send to Congress.
I think
you're very active online.
Active online, yeah. But I think one of the biggest ways you can have an influence. We get in the Twitter world and the social media world, and we end up talking to a lot of people either who already agree with us or can't stand us, and so we don't really, end up convincing each other. I think you can really be an influence in your local community when you're the person people come to go, I've been hearing all this stuff. What is really going on?
That's really great.
Because most people don't have time, understandably, to follow this stuff 24/7. And if that's kind of your thing and you're really into it and you can do that, you can be a true, breaker of news for folks and be fair and balanced. Be somebody that people trust.
What's the main message of this march? Is it that women won't be pushed backward by regulations, changes in the law, cuts in budgets that affect the programs that help them? Or is it bigger than that?
It's all of it, I think. There's a vast agenda. I think they released agenda recently, and it's a very long list of issues that, from Black Lives Matter, issues of social justice, access to reproductive services, all Supreme Court nominations, very, very broad.
We heard that there might not be a lot, that people of color might be underrepresented at the march. Is that true?
I think that there was a little bit of a slow momentum, actually, to be perfectly honest, coming out of the election. But
it was women of color, 3 women of color, who started the idea for the march on Facebook.
Well, that came on pretty early on. I don't believe they started it, but they came on early on. I know Tamika is very active. Linda, you mentioned those two were in your piece. They are very involved. Also, Carmen is helping them as well. So it is now a multiracial coalition of women, and I do expect the women to be in the streets to also be another multiracial representation of women from across the country.
I signed up for the march when I first heard about it because I'm just interested to be there. I really am. I just want to see what it's all about.
And if it is big, how should the Trump administration react to it?
I think the Trump administration will react however they will. That's what they've done all along. Coming out of the gate, the campaign does what they want to do. That's part of what the allure is to the average American, that this campaign doesn't play by the rules. And now this presidency will be unconventional. And they're fine with that because they've elected this gentleman. I'm going to be at this march really because I think the broader message is that women matter. This was an election that we saw the talk about women and sexual assault and all the issues that affect women come to the surface in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before. And I'm excited to just get out there and meet women who probably have nothing in common with me. And I just want to hear them out because I think we need greater dialogue. And if I stay away as a pro-life woman and simply because I've been a lifelong Republican, what does that say about me? And so I just feel like I should be there. I have a lot of liberal friends. I also have a lot of conservative friends. And I just want to be there to hear and open up the dialogue. And I think that's great for our country, just to have people get together.
I have to say this because I think it captures one point that I think you were trying to get to, and I think this program particularly, and you, Bonnie, personally have done, which is encourage a dialogue. From people with different perspectives, we do it with a lot of respect. We listen to each other, and I felt, because I've been in this program for so long, when the elections were happening, I understood so much more than most people because of the work that you've done. So in the list of things that activists should do is they should sit down and have a dialogue with people that have very different opinions from them.
I will just say one last thing about this march. It's not being, even the organizers are saying this is not an anti-Trump march.
Right, I was going to get to that.
Exactly. It really is a march about advancing women's rights. And it's not just, I love that it's not just focused on D.C., even though that's going to be the largest gathering. I love that this will be women all across the country standing up and being able to get together to think about and talk about and make a movement around an agenda that they can stand behind.
Well, but there's so many groups involved. It's going to be so large. I mean, people will take a 5-word message away from the march, and the march isn't putting out a 5-word message.
Yeah,
It's
well,
putting out
and I
3.
think that's a challenge. I mean, that's a challenge for anybody when you're trying to communicate in this day and age. But there are so many different groups, and some of them aren't even "quote unquote" women's groups, right? And that can
environment,
be, right,
and immigration. And
but so I would say there's two things. One, that can be a good thing. On the other hand, it's very hyphenated, if you will. And I think as a country, especially after the election we've had, we'd like to come together and be more. It doesn't mean everybody has to agree on every direction we're going to take. But there is I think people would like to come out of the first week in office, the first day in office, being a little bit more united. So I would hope that it's more of we're here to speak our piece, but not be antagonistic, because I don't think that's what people are going for.
All right, that's a good note to end on. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.